We're going to talk about Dan Shively's early radio career before he became a pilot with KCRA. You were in radio in Vallejo, which is where you grew up, right?
My hometown, and that was the closest thing to, broadcasting. Of course, I grew up on San Francisco TV and San Francisco radio, and I would pass the local radio station all the time. So when I was 12 years old, I got dressed up in my best suit and walked down and asked to see the manager and asked for a job, and I was hired cleaning windows and sweeping the floors and cleaning the bathrooms, mowing the lawn, that type
all
of thing.
prerequisites for radio.
You bet. And how many people have started like that? And that's
every disc jockey probably.
Yeah, and unfortunately it's almost impossible to do it that way anymore.
Yeah,
because
that's
now
true.
Radio stations are in a strip mall somewhere. But and they just in fact within the last 2 or 3 years they tore down that radio station. It was a purpose-built radio station, and it was very sad. But I worked my way onto the air.
So you're playing tunes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, spinning 45s.
Oh
right?
my God, no. Well, 45s and albums, but it's really funny. You walk into a modern radio station, and the last time I was in a modern radio station was probably, over 10 years ago, and it had changed so much then.
Yeah.
But we didn't even have
digital now.
We didn't even have cart machines.
Right.
I mean, literally, all the commercials were on either a vinyl disc that we cut ourselves, or on reel-to-reel tape, or they were read live, and 45s and LPs, and it was really hometown, low-budget local radio. It was a 250-watt station, and it was only on during the daylight hours.
And that was in 1958.
Wow. God, I hate to admit that, but
the birth of rock and roll. You were there.
But it was, and it wasn't really a rock station. In fact, I got in trouble a couple of times for playing rock music because it was more up-tempo MOR, that type of thing. But I feel fortunate that I got to see that end of it, because it was really the end of an era. And because radio hadn't really changed for
back then DJs got to play
years.
what they wanted, right?
They did, yeah. And there was one fellow who came in. He worked in a bank during the week, and that always seemed to be a common thread too. In order to work at the radio station, you usually had to work somewhere else to afford it.
Right.
In junior college, and I worked at a drugstore. Then I did some weekend stuff on the radio station. But there was a fellow named Jerry Dean who would come in on Saturday morning, and he had a 4-hour jazz show, and he would show up with his own albums.
Yeah.
And
truckload.
He later, with another guy named Pat Henry, put K-Jazz on the air, which was a pioneer Bay Area jazz station.
I worked at that station later when it became something completely different.
Really? Oh, so you know all about it.
Yeah, it actually, it switched frequencies, and but I studied the history of K-Jazz. It later became Energy 92.7, which later became something else. But that station has a deep history in the Bay, I think.
Yeah, it really did, and I got to see. We did remotes. There was always going to the local coffee shop or the supper club, or going out and covering fairs and I did horse racing one summer. Sat in the press box and recreated horse races because they couldn't be done live.
So how did you make the transition from radio to television?
Primarily through school. When I went to junior college in Vallejo, and then I went to Sac State.
Oh, I did too.
Have you been out there lately? Boy, that's a big difference from what I remember. And we had a very small TV department, extremely small, and I think it was borrowed or used equipment from Channel 3. And then we had the student radio station, so I worked at both.
KERS.
You bet.
Yeah. That was the landmark, legendary station for its time that I guess predated KZAP.
It did.
Yeah, so it was doing what KZAP did before KZAP.
In fact, there were like Charlie Weiss and Paul Merriam. They were both
from there,
KERS people that went on to KZAP. And that must have happened. I got drafted shortly after I got out of college. And so right around 69 or 70, I believe, is when KZAP came around, because
68, late 68.
68. Because when I got back, it was up and running.
Yeah.
But it was, I think, another fellow and I, Frank LaRosa, who was in the,
I know Frank.
You know Frank.
Yeah.
We got a part-time job over at Channel 6. just running camera.
Okay.
And that was the first, real working job that I had in television.
Okay.
And then got drafted a few months later and ended up in the Marine Corps. And because of the education and experience, I ended up in the public affairs office doing radio and very little TV, but some TV. So when I got back out, I missed out right before I got drafted, I got hired at Channel 10.
Really?
On the floor crew.
Okay.
And which included, doing the production assistant thing and also running the printing press to print up stuff for the station.
Okay.
And so 2 years later, when I got out of the military, I went back to work there as, again, production assistant for a year. And then while I was there, I worked at 1 day a week doing news at crack radio on Sunday morning. Get up real early.
Yeah.
And I get off.
Big Jim Hall.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was the, you bet, that was, boy, what a great station that was. Well known throughout the country.
Sure.
For country music. And let's see, I got fired. That's the only job I ever got fired from, surprisingly, in broadcasting. But they just eliminated the position.
Yeah.
So then I got on to a similar job, Saturday and Sunday morning, doing news at the old KXOA when it was over on Loma Vista, right off of
Do you mean
Fulton Avenue.
The AM or the FM?
The FM,
Okay.
KXOA FM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
you
quite
were
a few people, a lot of people, took off from there too. And then, so I was doing this while I was working at Channel 10, and then a job opened up in Chico for a news reporter. So I went and applied for it and got it, and that was a small market, but boy, you do everything. We were still shooting film back in those days, 16 millimeter film. So I ended up, shooting and editing film, reporting and shooting, and anchoring one show.
Okay.
And that's where it really all came together. And from there on to KCRA radio, and then on to KCRA TV. So it's all. I've been very fortunate that, most of my career has been Northern California, which you can't say for a lot of people or things.
And to work at one of the top TV stations in America, from what I'm researching. It looks like, they're an amazing source that feeds the nation for documentaries and all kinds of news footage.
It was a fun time, a real fun time. And, I heard George Lucas just the other day. He was asked about, how do you know what your passion is? And he said that when you sit down in the morning to do something at 7 o'clock, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm hungry, I think I'll break for lunch, and it's 7 p.m., and you haven't even realized it,
Right.
That's your passion. And that's the way it was. Even at Channel 10, working behind the scenes, never worked an 8-hour day. I'd get off the shift and we'd stay there for another few hours doing whatever, just hanging around. And it was nice, again, in those days, to be able to do that, to be able to work in different positions, or at least to help out and at least to learn. And I think a lot of that's gone now.
Dan, I want to learn about what you think are some of the best highlights at KCRA coming up in the next segment.